among the four sisters, who grew up in the Alexandra Palace, there was a child who seemed made of quicksilver. She did not enter a room, so much as arrive in it. Sudden, bright, impossible to ignore. Her name was Anastasia. She was born on the 5th of June, 1901, the fourth daughter of the last Tsar and Tsarina. By the time she arrived, the pattern of the family was already set. Olga and Tatiana formed the big pair. Maria, only 22 months older, would become her closest companion, as they would form the little pair. Yet Anastasia never simply followed. Where Maria moved with open-hearted warmth, Anastasia moved with mischief, lightning intelligence, and an almost physical need to disturb the settled order of things. Pierre Gilliard, who taught the children French for 13 years, left one of the clearest and most affectionate portraits. Anastasia, he wrote, was very roguish and almost a wag. She possessed a strong sense of humor, and the darts of her wit often found sensitive spots. She was also extremely idle, yet it was the idleness of a gifted child. Her French accent was excellent, and she acted scenes from comedy with remarkable talent. She was so lively and her gaiety so infectious that several members of the suite had fallen into the way of calling her Sunshine, the same nickname her mother had once been given at the English court. Lily Dehn, who was very close to the family, and especially to the younger girls, saw the same restless brilliance. She wrote, "Anastasia might have been composed of quicksilver instead of flesh and blood. She was most amusing, a very clever mimic who saw the humorous side of everything and was passionately fond of acting. Indeed, she would have made an excellent comedy actress. She was always in mischief, a regular tomboy, yet she was not backward in her development. She was pretty, but hers was more of a clever face, and her eyes were wells of intelligence." Anna Vurubova remembered a sharp and clever child, a very monkey for jokes, some of them at times almost too practical for the enjoyment of others. One winter on the family's Polish estate, the children were snowballing. Anastasia rolled a stone inside a snowball and threw it at her dearly loved sister Tatiana. The missile struck the girl fairly in the face with such force that she fell senseless to the ground. The grief and horror that followed lasted many days and permanently cured Anastasia of her worst propensities for that particular kind of practical joke. Even her repentance was wholehearted and dramatic, another intense expression from a nature that felt everything strongly. This was a girl who grew up under the quiet, almost austere discipline of the imperial household. The children slept on camp beds, a custom that reached back to earlier reigns. They ate plain food, followed a strict timetable of lessons and prayer, and lived under the constant loving but exacting gaze of a mother who valued sincerity above every courtly accomplishment. The restrictions never quite contained Anastasia. She climbed where she was not supposed to climb. She hid in cupboards and behind curtains. She imitated the voices, walks, and mannerisms of courtiers and servants with such accuracy that people either dissolved into laughter or felt the sting of recognition. When the saluting guns of the imperial yacht Standard were fired, she would flee into a corner, jam her fingers into her ears, widen her eyes to an absurd degree, and stick out her tongue in a theatrical expression of mock terror. The family also called her Shvybzik, a nickname that belonged both to the girl and to her little dog. It likely came from the German word Shvybzik, meaning tipsy or giddily merry, and was used with affection by her aunt Olga Alexandrovna. The puppy itself was a small Pomeranian, a fluffy toy Spitz. In the spring of 1915, he appears in the sisters' letters, sleeping on the Empress's bed and hiding under the sofa. That June, Anastasia wrote,
"I miss dear Shvybzik."
The little dog had died, still very young. The name, however, stayed with her. Her relationships with her sisters reveal the same double nature. With Maria, she formed the little pair, two younger girls who shared a bedroom, private jokes, and a world of their own. With her elder sisters, she could be both devoted and exasperating. The Ts, who remained fiercely loyal. When the war came, Anastasia was 13, too young for the operating theatre, where Olga and Tatiana worked with such intensity and personal cost. She and Maria visited the wounded in the hospitals of Tsarskoye Selo and Petrograd. They read to the men, helped them write letters home, played board games, and brought the particular brightness that only Anastasia seemed able to summon at will. The soldiers responded to her, as they did to few others. She was not the serene, almost saintly presence her mother could be, nor the quietly competent surgical nurse that Tatiana became. She was something more unpredictable, and for that reason, sometimes more comforting. A living reminder that the world could still contain mischief, laughter, and sudden joy. In Captivity, the same quality refused to die. In the governor's house at Tobolsk, the four sisters performed little plays for their parents and the remaining members of the household. Sidney Gibbs, their English tutor, later recalled that Anastasia's performances made everyone laugh. Even after the family was divided and she remained in Tobolsk, her letters still carried the same unmistakable voice. In May 1918, she wrote to Maria, who was in Ekaterinburg with her parents, describing a fall from a swing.
We swung on the swings, and when I fell, it was such a wonderful fall. Yes, indeedy. I told the sisters about this so many times yesterday that they got tired of hearing about it, but I could tell again and again.
Helen Azar, translator of the Romanov family's letters and diaries, has spent years bringing their own words into English. Here she speaks about the writings of Grand Duchess Anastasia.
Anastasia's diaries did not survive. She, like her sister, destroyed her diaries, but it was all of them. If three of Maria's survived, Anastasia did not leave any behind. So I couldn't say what kind of style and how she was at diary keeping, but her letters were full of personality and humor. She was very funny. So her letters are really fun to read. We know from descriptions by her contemporaries that she liked to entertain people, that she was sort of a clown. She liked to make people laugh. And you could tell it was the same with her letters. She's the one who shows the most contrast in the style and in the mood of the way she wrote her letters before and after the revolution. There's a really big difference. She still retains the sense of humor and the basic personality, but you can tell that she had to grow up real fast. There's a lot of sadness in post-revolutionary letters, which she never had before. Her correspondence was really carefree before 1917.
The handwriting is sometimes uneven, the spelling crooked when she is tired or emotional, but the spirit is intact. Even as the circle closed around them, she continued to invent amusement, to notice the absurd, and to offer affection in the same extravagant, slightly theatrical style that had always been hers. Gilliard, who had watched the four sisters across 13 years, found their collective charm difficult to define. It was an extreme simplicity, candor, freshness, and instinctive kindness of heart. Within that shared grace, Anastasia was the spark. She was not the most intellectual like Olga, nor the most disciplined and quietly authoritative like Tatiana, nor the most openly tender and physically affectionate like Maria. She was the one who made the others laugh when laughter seemed impossible, who turned even the narrowing walls of captivity into material for a comic scene, who carried inside her an unquenchable sense that life, however reduced, was still something to be answered with wit, movement, and joy. The final months in Ekaterinburg did not erase her. Guards who later spoke of the family remembered her attempts to remain lively. One recalled Anastasia as a charming little devil, so mischievous that one could not get bored in her company. She continued to make comic faces and small performances, sometimes with her little dog. The same quicksilver vitality that had once disrupted the orderly nursery of the Alexandra Palace still flickered, even under the eyes of men who had been ordered to see her only as a prisoner.
In the days following the murders, newspapers reported only that the Tsar had been killed. For 8 years, the Soviet state maintained that the rest of the imperial family was still alive and well, but the cover-up eventually collapsed, forcing the Soviet government to change its story and make a shocking admission. The entire imperial family, together with their 4 servants, had been executed. Soon, however, reports began to emerge of sightings of the young Crown Prince Alexei and Grand Duchess Anastasia. Rumors of their survival spread, and the mystery surrounding the fate of the Romanov children would persist for decades.
Under Stalin's iron rule, it was forbidden to even mention the royal family. In the 1950s, a member of the original firing squad surfaced in the United States. Austrian Rudolf Lasser claimed he had been left to guard a truck carrying the royal bodies. When he got stuck in the mud in the middle of a forest, he said he helped a wounded Anastasia escape. The story of Anastasia's supposed survival continued for decades. The most famous claimant was Anna Anderson, who emerged in Germany and eventually became convinced others that she was the surviving Grand Duchess Anastasia. Anderson's story attracted considerable attention. She claimed to have survived the execution and presented details that some people believed corresponded with Anastasia's life. Members of European aristocratic circles and people who had known the Romanov family became divided over her identity.
My mother-in-law, to her dying days, to her last day, believed that Anna Anderson was Anastasia. For instance, she had a triangular injury on her foot, which was probably a bayonet stab. She also had the same stub toe problem as Anastasia. She had the same ear as Anastasia. There were a lot of similarities between the two.
Eventually, however, DNA testing established that Anna Anderson was not Anastasia. The testing showed that she was Franziska Szankowska, a Polish factory worker. One of the most famous claims of Anastasia's survival was therefore disproved scientifically. But the broader mystery remained because 2 Romanov children had still not been found. In 1991, 9 sets of remains were discovered near Ekaterinburg. The Tsar and Tsarina, 3 of their daughters, and 4 members of their household were eventually identified, but Alexei and one of his sisters were missing. The discovery left the Romanov family incomplete, and the absence of 2 children allowed stories of survival to continue.
In 1991, 9 sets of remains were found. There were 11 people that were killed in Ekaterinburg that night. 2 sets of remains were still missing.
Then, in 2007, little more than 60 meters from the first grave, a second burial site was discovered. The remains were badly damaged. Instead of nearly complete skeletons, investigators found fragments that had been broken and burned. Careful forensic examination established that the fragments belonged to 2 individuals, 1 male and 1 female. This corresponded precisely with the 2 missing members of the imperial family, Alexei and one of his sisters. The remains were subjected to DNA examination because the bones had spent almost 90 years underground and had also been damaged by burning. Obtaining usable DNA was extremely difficult. Carefully selected samples were examined, with the investigation involving laboratories in different countries. After months of work, the male remains were compared with DNA from Tsar Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra. The result was conclusive. The male remains were the son of Nicholas and Alexandra. They were the remains of Tsarevich Alexei Romanov. The female remains were then compared with those of Alexei. The DNA established that she was his sister.
In the contemporary BBC report, the female remains are identified as those of Grand Duchess Maria. This reflected the anthropological and forensic assessment of the Russian investigators. DNA testing, however, could establish only that she was one of Alexei's sisters. Genetically, it could not determine whether she was Maria or Anastasia.
Now, one of the greatest mysteries in Russia's history has finally been solved. Tests have confirmed that human remains found last year are those of the last Tsar's two missing children. It proves that all of Nicholas II's immediate family were executed by revolutionaries 90 years ago.
Russia's last emperor, Tsar Nicholas II, his wife and their 5 children were shot by the Bolsheviks in 1918. But until last year, the remains of 2 of the children hadn't been found, and conspiracy theories that they may have survived the revolution flourished. Now, tests on bones discovered east of Moscow last year have confirmed that Prince Alexei and his sister Maria were murdered at the same time as the rest of their family.
Yes, we have really found the children, and all the experts we asked to examine the remains confirmed it. The genetic laboratory in the United States has completed its work and confirmed it, as well as our own lab.
The bones were found in a forest near where the rest of the family remains were discovered in 1991. Their final moments were far from regal, herded into a cellar by the revolutionaries before being brutally murdered and their bodies dumped in pits. It's thought the remains of the last 2 imperial children will now be buried alongside the rest of their family in St. Petersburg, bringing to an end one of Russia's most enduring mysteries. Jane Haddon, BBC News.
All 5 Romanov children were therefore accounted for. This was the decisive evidence in the case of Anastasia. The DNA evidence from the second grave did not give the female remains a specific name. It did something more important. It closed the gap in the Romanov graves and established that the missing daughter was no longer missing. Almost 90 years after the execution, every member of the immediate Romanov family had finally been accounted for in death. Anastasia did not slip away into legend. She stayed with them to the end. She did not vanish into another life. She completed the one that was given to her, and in that completion, she remains eternal.